Welcome, dear viewers, to News Around Your Home, for stories that go beyond red carpets and tabloid headlines, where emotions breathe and hearts still dare to feel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and tap join to become part of our growing family that believes love stories deserve to be told with depth, not drama. Today, we step into a story that feels like a whisper in the storm, a tale not of grand declarations, but of silent loyalty, fragile resilience, and the invisible threads that tie two souls even when the world tries to pull them apart. This is the untold story of Gökberk Yıldırım and Cemre Arda, a love that refused to disappear, even when every rumor screamed that it should. In a time where relationships seemed to dissolve faster than the ink on their announcements, this one stood like a monument against the current. No matter how many times the press declared it over, no matter how often fans sighed in disappointment at the latest gossip of a breakup, something deeper was still there. It wasn't just affection, it was endurance, the kind that doesn't fade when cameras stop flashing. People close to Gökberk say the reason was painfully simple: loving her hurts, but living without her hurts more. Those words, whispered among his inner circle, reveal a man not enslaved by passion but haunted by devotion, the kind of devotion that doesn't fade when logic says it should. Friends describe nights when he vanished from the public eye, when the weight of his heart threatened to crush him, when the silence between them felt like a canyon. He thought about leaving, about disappearing into anonymity abroad, far from her laughter echoing through TV screens or the scent of her perfume that still lingered in his car. But every time he tried to erase her, the universe reminded him that love isn't something you delete, it's something that stains. A familiar song on the radio, a headline mentioning her name, a voice in an advertisement, every sound led him back. What outsiders saw as weakness was, in truth, loyalty of a rare kind, a loyalty that transcends romance and becomes moral gravity. Gökberk, those close to him insist, couldn't walk away from a woman who hides her fragility behind laughter. Cemre, admired by millions for her elegance and confidence, is not the unshakable figure people imagine. Behind the perfect photos, there are sleepless nights, inner storms, and an invisible trembling she's learned to disguise. "He knows her when no one is watching," said one friend quietly. "He knows the way she flinches at sudden noises, the nights she dreams of her childhood fears, the mornings she sits in silence staring at the sea as if asking it to answer questions life never did. That's why he never truly left, because he feared that if he did, the world would too." The idea of her collapsing alone terrified him more than any argument, any heartbreak. Few people know that Cemre was the one who stood beside him during his darkest career chapter. When producers turned their backs, when scripts stopped coming, and when he began doubting his worth, she was there defending him in public, lifting his spirit in private. She became his voice when he lost his own. So now, when life turned its back on her, how could he turn his back on her? Those close to the couple describe it not as romantic obsession but as repayment, an emotional debt that love had written long ago. Every time he waited for her outside hospitals, every time he answered her messages even when he knew she might not respond, he was repaying something deeper than affection. He was honoring a promise made in silence, that love, real love, doesn't vanish when applause stops. There were no grand gestures. No sparkling rings, no magazine covers. What the cameras missed were the quiet acts that defined sincerity: him sitting in his car outside her home until the lights went off, making sure she was safe before he left, him showing up unannounced when she fell ill, him leaving groceries by her door when she was too anxious to go out. These are not acts of a man chasing attention. These are the habits of a heart that refuses to stop caring. And maybe that's why fans have begun calling him the silent guardian. He doesn't post poetic declarations, he doesn't craft captions soaked in nostalgia. He simply shows up, consistently, quietly, unwaveringly. Today, the question on everyone's lips remains, are they still together? But perhaps that question no longer matters. Maybe this is a connection that outgrew the need for labels. Maybe they exist in that sacred gray space between love and loyalty, where two souls choose each other not for romance, but for survival. A fan recently wrote online, "It's not that he couldn't live without her. It's that he chose not to learn how." And perhaps that's the closest anyone will ever get to understanding the truth. Sources close to the actor reveal a defining moment one evening when Cemre, overwhelmed by the noise of fame and the exhaustion of expectation, collapsed in silence. She didn't scream, she didn't call for help, she simply sat on the floor and stared into the void. Gökberk found her there. And instead of offering empty comfort, he simply sat beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed. He just cried with her, not as a lover, but as a witness to her pain. Later, he reportedly told a friend, "That night, I didn't tell her I loved her. I decided to prove it." That night, the meaning of love changed for him. It became less about passion and more about presence. Those who know Gökberk say he never viewed love as a pretty emotion to display. For him, it's a responsibility, a promise to stand firm even when affection fades into exhaustion. When Cemre demanded space, he gave it, but stayed near enough to protect her if needed. When she vanished from contact, he didn't chase her or accuse her, he simply waited, keeping his phone on, his heart open. When she believed everything was over, he didn't argue, he just returned, quietly, as if love itself had no expiration date. He often repeats one line to friends, "I don't want to be the man who loves her when she shines. I want to be the one who endures when she burns." It's not the language of fairy tales, it's the language of endurance. Perhaps he no longer dreams of winning her back in the traditional sense. Maybe the story of Gökberk and Cemre is not about reconciliation, but redemption. Sometimes he drives her to doctor appointments. Sometimes he brings her food but doesn't go inside. Sometimes he just waits outside her window until the light goes out, ensuring she's safe before leaving. He isn't controlling. He isn't obsessive. He's simply guarding the person who once guarded him. To the world, they might seem broken. But to those who truly watch, they're proof that love doesn't always need to be loud to be alive. And that, dear viewers, is the story of a man who stayed when the world expected him to walk away. A love that doesn't scream for attention, but whispers through presence. What do you think? Is this kind of quiet, unwavering devotion still possible in today's world? Would you stay for someone even when love hurts? Tell us your thoughts below, we read every single comment. If you want to see more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the join button to support News Around. Because here, we don't just report love stories, we preserve them. Until next time, stay close to your hearts and stay tuned with News Around, where every emotion finds its echo.